So, but putting aside all the jokes, I'm really honored to be here, and it's a special honor that it's not my first speech to to this beautiful community, to all of you. So my topic today, as I called it in a slightly modern way, 3K. It's not 3,000. It's 3K letters of Kovno, Keidan, and Kalvarija. I'll make some short introduction into Lithuanian history. Those who were on my Vilnius speech, you got a little bit a longer version of it. This time, as I have a little bit longer video, so the history part will be shorter. Then you will be able to ask some questions. I'll give you an opportunity. So if you want to speak out, I'll be happy to speak with you. And you know, in a new normal way, actually, it's very convenient to sit at home and to speak to you in another part of the world. But actually, the big drawback is that I don't hear you and I don't feel emotions, or at least most of emotions are impossible to grasp here. So actually, so you can use chat for questions, and Charlie will help me with these questions, or you can speak out. So Lithuania, I'll share my screen for a presentation, a short presentation I prepared for you. So can you see it well, Charlie? Yeah, everything is well? Okay. So
looks great. The only thing, Daniel, is if you wanted to make it full screen, but it's not necessary, sure. Because we can see it well.
This one, I guess. No, this one. So Lithuania today is a small country in northeastern Europe, and you can see the blue Lithuania on the map on the left side, and the green Lithuania. Lithuania is more green than blue actually on the right hand side of the two maps, and you see the neighbors. There is Poland on the south, Belarus southeast, long border with Latvia, our northern neighbors, a little bit of the Baltic Sea on the west, and Russian enclave Kaliningrad. So this is the geography of Lithuania. Lithuania is a flat country, no mountains, but a lot of lakes, a lot of rivers, and the beautiful green nature with a lot of different green colors, green and yellow colors of the country. So it was first time mentioned about 1,000 years ago, and Lithuanians are famous as last pagans of Europe, who finally baptized themselves, Christianized the country only by the end of the 14th century. So about the same time, a little bit earlier than the baptism of Lithuania, the first Jews arrived to these lands, and they came mostly from the German lands. The one who invited the Jews into Lithuania was Grand Duke Gediminas, and he invited the Jews not specifically the Jews, but he invited all the foreigners, and he promised these foreigners good conditions, freedom of settlement, freedom of the occupation, freedom for being involved in any businesses they wanted, and even lower taxes for some period of time. So speaking of historical paradoxes, you all know what happened in Lithuania in the 20th century and all the terrible things of the Holocaust. But actually the paradox is that relations between Lithuanians and Jews in the 14th and 15th centuries were very positive, and there was a lot of tolerance towards the Jews. and not only the Jews. And of course, there were also dark points of Lithuanian history. And the last saying on this slide is expulsion from Lithuania, which happened in 1495, when the Jews had to leave Lithuania. Most of them went to Polish lands. Some of them went to Ukrainian, at that time, Russian Duchy's land. So 16th century is very interesting in Poland and Polish-Lithuanian history, as these two countries, Poland and big Lithuania included the area of Belarus. You see it is surrounded by a red border as one country. So Lithuania and Poland became one country. At that time, what is today Ukraine, you can see it was part of Poland. So in 1569, these two big countries signed a union, a contract in the city of Lublin, and they became one country, the Confederation of Two Nations, a Commonwealth of Two Nations. And this period lasted for over 200 years. It was political military union against possible aggressions from Russian side or from German side. So the Jews in that perspective, and this is the second line of the title of this slide, Golden Age of Lithuanian Jewry, Golden Age of Polish Jewry as well, but as today we concentrate on Lithuanian history, so Lithuania will be dominant in my presentation, with the giving all the appropriate credit to Polish Jewry as well. So at that time, Lithuania, Poland gave the Jews autonomy. And that's why it is called the Golden Age of Lithuanian or Polish Jewry. So they had self-government laws. They had a parliament, which was called kahal, or community in Hebrew. They had inside community taxes, which was absolutely not trivial at that time, because all the taxes were to the Grand Duke or to the municipalities, to town halls, but inside community taxes, if people collected money for charity, for example, it couldn't be called taxes. So Jews had such a strong cultural autonomy that they could officially have inside community taxes. The tax was called a box tax, and most of the money was to the support of schools, of yeshivot. So, and at the same time, there was a religious tolerance from the non-Jewish authorities to the Jewish autonomy. And Vilnius became a very big, important, and later on very famous center of Torah studies. And this is the basis of actually Litvak world, the basis of Lithuanian Jews being known in the Jewish world and also in the world in general, I would say. So this golden age lasted, for the Jews, it lasted a little bit over 150 years. And then was partition of Poland, Lithuania, and you can see another map here with a red border, which cuts the territory of the Commonwealth into three parts. Half went to Russian hands, Catherine the Great, 230 years ago. A little bit less, actually. 1/3 went to Prussia, and about 20% to Austro-Hungary, Habsburgs at that time. So, and the Russian period, which lasted for 120 years, was very difficult for Lithuania in general. A lot of changes, geographical, political, social, cultural changes. Russians had an idea to Russify the people, to make all the people equal against the law, and they didn't do much for that, but they also had an idea of making the Russian Orthodoxy as a dominant religion. So, of course, this had a huge impact on the Jewish communities. And if we speak about like Lithuanian dukes period, 14th and 15th century as a golden age, then, sorry, as an age of tolerance, then a golden age, then the Russian period was like the beginning of the end of this Jewry. Now, for some Jews, it was a good Enlightenment movement followers. They found a lot of opportunities of integration into the general community, of going to the universities, going to the general schools, becoming people of the world and not being segregated in closed communities, and not going to Kahal, not going to the synagogue, but becoming writers and doctors and teachers and whatever as part of the general community. And of course, we all know that the 19th century was the period of the transition from a very religious life to a more secular way of life. The influence comes from Germany, Moses Mendelssohn, the translation of Bible into German language, and so on and so forth. In these lands, it happened a little bit later, but it did happen. So now the great exodus, the next slide is referring to the end of the 19th century, 1882. Russian Tsar Alexander II was assassinated, and Jews were blamed for killing the Tsar. And there were official pogroms, which were organized by militia, by police, by the guards, and a lot of Jews who lived in shtetls, they lived quite a poor life, and they didn't have much to lose. And when there was also a danger for their health and life, then thousands and thousands of Jews dared to leave the old world, to leave Eastern Europe, and to emigrate. So emigration of 2.7 million Jews, which would be emigration of 60% of Russian Jewry. A lot of them went to the United States. A lot of Litvaks went to South Africa, because at a certain point it was already impossible to get a permit to go to the promised land, the golden Medina, as they used to say. Then the 20th century came up, and there was a First World War. There was no Holocaust during the First World War, as all you know, but in this part of the world, it wasn't very sweet for the Jews at that time. A lot of them were expelled deeper into Russia as elements who could potentially betray Russians and spy to the German side and try to run away, and so on and so forth. After the war, independence of Lithuania, evolvement of Lithuania as an independent state, and here I mark the map of Lithuania with a national flag, which is a tricolor of yellow, green, and red. 20th century, a short period of, again, with a lot of tolerance between the First World War and the Second World War, and the 1940 first Soviet occupation, then the Second World War, which is a Holocaust for us. Second Soviet occupation for Lithuanians started in 1944, lasted up until 1991, and Lithuania became independent. It was the first republic of the Soviet Union republics, which separated and joined NATO and European Union in 2004. So this is it about the historical part. Yeah, it's like 15 minutes. It's okay. Yeah, I'm open to your questions.
I just wanted to, we got a couple questions, one of which is just, was there any connection of the Jews being expelled in 1495? Was there a connection to the expulsion of the Jews from Spain in 1492, in Portugal 1497?
Actually, there was no direct connection. Jews were expelled in many countries in Europe. The greatest and the most infamous expulsion from Spain, 1492, is connected with the Eastern Europe or Northeastern Europe in another way. Some of the Sephardi Jews, they made their way through Europe and they found themselves in 17th century or early 18th century in these lands. So some of Litvaks, and my family is one of the examples, we do have Sephardi roots. But this is the connection. There is no direct connection between 1492 and 1495. 1495 expulsion from Lithuania. 3,000 Jews were in Lithuania at that time, and they went, most of them went to Poland and were allowed back into Lithuania 6 years later in 1501.
Right. One thing I just want to point out, not a question, but one of the, as a Litvak myself, or a Jew of Lithuanian descent, and if you are a Litvak here, of the 300 of us, if you want to give a thumbs up or give a wave again, just we have a nice showing of Litvaks. So we'll meet afterwards for Kiddush. We'll have a little meat and a little bit of herring. But one of the things that I did want to mention is that in terms of modern Lithuania, one of the things I learned from you, Daniel, is that it's one of the few countries in the world, or a country in the world, that has 2 Independence Days that are celebrated every year, right? There's one in February, there's one in November, and there's one in April, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. One February, one March.
February
March
and April.
11th.
Yeah. So I have my Litvak flag, and we're honored that that Grant Goshen is with us today, and we know that our Jewish Lithuanian past and present is a little complicated, to say the very least, but it is a part, for those of us who are there, it is a part of our heritage. I think we should move on to the virtual walking tour. So thank you for the great introduction, Daniel.
So before we move to the virtual tour using the video materials, I want to add to the historical part of our tour the source of the word Litvak, when it happened. So the autonomy was in 16th century, 17th century Lithuania, Poland, and this golden age. That when this story started, there was no such thing as Polish Jews or Lithuanian Jews or Ukrainian Jews or Belarusian Jews. These were Ashkenazi Jews. Some of them made their way from Spain into Ashkenazi territory, and they within 2-3 generations they also were the bearers of Ashkenazi Jewish tradition. Now, the word Litvak, which has geographical national belonging to certain territory, evolved in 1623. In 1623, inside this huge Jewish community, with the kahal and with the schools, with the synagogues and so on and so forth, there was a split, and this only proves that it was a real Jewish community. So what happened during the assembly of 300 members from Poland and Lithuania, the representatives of Lithuanian side, they stood up and said that they don't want to be members of it was called the Jewish Council of it was called the Jewish Council, and they declared that they will establish the Jewish Council of Lithuania. And the Polish Jews, they got mad and they were very angry, and they said, a Litvak. Now, what does it mean in Polish language, a Litvak? Litva in Polish is Lithuania, and ak is a negative suffix to the word. It's not a curse, but it's negative. So they said the Litvak in a negative way, all these Litvaks. And the answer was all these Polaks. Yeah, so also like a Polish with a little bit of of a negative connotation. Now, it's a funny story, and it's a true story. That's what I like about this piece of history. And actually, the word Litvak is a cultural, non-official definition, which is widely used today. And later on, there were some religious confrontations, because the split was before the split between the Hasidim and the Mitnagdim, the Hasidic Jews and the opponents, which are Litvaks. Yeah, this happened much later, 150 years later. So, what are the differences? Are we different from Polish Jews? So, to cut the long story short, we are the same. We have the same books. We have the same traditions. Everything is the same. What is different? Some folklore is different. So we say that Lithuanian Jews, the Litvaks, they put more salt into their food, and the Polish Jews, they tended to put a little bit more sugar. And actually, if we compare Lithuanian and Polish cuisine, there is such a difference. You find much more sweet dishes in Polish culture than in Lithuanian culture. Not speaking about Jewish culture, speaking about local cultures. So, and what else? And Yiddish could be a little bit different. Yeah, they say maybe kik, and we say cook. So not a big difference. So for those who are Litvaks, I think this story would add to your arsenal of stories and jokes you can tell other people. Now, I will share my screen again. I will use video materials, which my team of the guides and myself, we did during the very interesting year of pandemic. So the video will be muted, and I'll speak, I'll give my explanations in a live way. Okay, can you see it? Hope so. So we are in Kaunas. Kaunas is the second large city of Lithuania. It's located 100 kilometers west from Vilnius. And it's actually Kaunas is older than Vilnius. And here I glance inside an abandoned building. And you can see from my body language that I said that there is nothing inside. And when we go to show you the structure of the building, you see typical arched windows. This is one of the synagogues of Kaunas. It's not an active shul today. It was a synagogue of butchers, and it stands in the very center of the old city. You will see me now showing backwards to the roof of the cathedral, that little roof which you see on the left side of the screen of the frame. It's a cathedral. So from the Catholic Church, from the main church of Kaunas to one of the synagogues was like 1 minute walk, 2 minutes walk. So Jews in Kaunas, it's very interesting. They settled in Kaunas much later than in Vilnius. In Vilnius, there was a huge Jewish community. In the 16th century, Jews were not allowed into Kaunas. In the 17th century, it was about the same. And only by the end of the 18th century, Jews were allowed into Kaunas. And when they were allowed into Kaunas, many of them who lived around Kaunas wanted to go to the city to settle there and to establish their businesses. And at the end of the 19th century, Jews were 61% of the Kaunas citizens. And here I point on the plaque on the wall, which memorializes the first championship of table tennis of Lithuania, organized by the sports club Maccabi in 1927. So this culture and tradition of memorializing cultural events and heritage quite developed in Lithuania. And you can see here on the wall that there is a new gray plaster, and there is a piece of the wall which has some Cyrillic letters on it. So it's an advertisement to enter the shop. Here once was a shop. We don't know if it was a Jewish shop or non-Jewish shop, but a lot of such discoveries were done recently in the old city of Kaunas. So back to the 60% of the population, it's really hard to imagine. My family lived in Kaunas at that time when there were 60% of the population. And as my Zayda used to say, that non-Jews used to speak Yiddish in Kaunas. It was good to know Yiddish. So here I sit on a statue and I read from a book from my cell phone and not from a real book. This is a statue of a Jewish writer, Avraham Mapu. Now Mapu lived 150 years ago, more than 150. He was born 1807, and he's famous for writing in Hebrew. He was the author of the first Hebrew novel, which he wrote in 1850. And so at that time, Hebrew was a holy language which was not used in a daily life. And he was a religious person who switched to the Enlightenment movement. And he was author of 4 novels and some stories and some articles. And he passed away in 1867 in Königsberg, which is today Kaliningrad. Now, this building was a Jewish library. And also there was an office of the Organization of Jewish Fighters who participated in the War of Independence. That's what Charlie added, that there are 2 Independence Days, so the independence of 1918. And here I find myself on the crossroad of Abraham Mapu Street, by the name of the writer, and Ludwig Zaminhoff Street, the street I'm currently on. So Zaminhoff, he was born in Poland, in Bialystok, but he lived in Kaunas for a short period of time. And he's famous for inventing Esperanto language. So that's why the city authorities decided not so long ago to memorialize a Jewish doctor who invented Esperanto by naming the street after him. Now, on this street,
the only thing is, Daniel, just want to pause one moment to maybe just explain what Esperanto is in case someone doesn't know.
Sure. Esperanto is an artificial language which was invented by a Jewish boy. Zaminhoff was 14 years old when he invented the language. He wrote a very complicated book which was called My Language. He showed it to the professor of linguistics in Warsaw University, and professor told him that the book is very interesting, but his advice was that if you want to publish such a book, you should rewrite it in a more simple way. And Zaminhoff rewrote the book and also rethought the concept of Esperanto language and made it very easy to study language. And actually his idea was to fix the world. He grew in a multicultural, multinational community of Bialystok, and he saw a lot of conflicts among different nationalities there. And his idea was that if all these people would speak the same language, then most probably the relations between these people would be much, much better. Now, in the meantime, we have reached Zamenhof number 7 and number 9, 2 buildings. Now you can see number 7. This is a very traditional structure of the Jewish school. Now you can see the ground floor with quite big windows, and you can see that there is a space in the attic of the house. These were rooms for students, boys, later on late 19th century, also girls, to stay in. So this building is in its original shape, and the neighboring building is also very typical building of a synagogue. You see that there is no central window. It is decorated as a window, but it is blocked. This is the place of the Ark of Aron HaKodesh inside the synagogue. So both buildings don't belong to the Jewish community today. They both belong to the medical center, private medical center. And when Jewish community sold this building to I don't know, to some private people, the only condition was not to change the outside of the building, the exterior decoration. Now this 3-floor brown building I'm walking next to and showing you the plug on the wall, which says about one of the Hebrew schools, Hebrew High School, which was opened in 1922 and existed up until 1940. In 1940, all the national schools were closed as the first Soviet occupation started. And here is another plug memorializing Lea Goldberg, a very famous Israeli poetess who was born and grew up in Kovno, or Kaunas. She studied in this Hebrew school. She studied in Kaunas non-Jewish, naturally, university. Later on in Berlin, made her PhD and went to Israel, emigrated to Israel in 1935, and became very famous personality in Israel. She passed away in 1970, if I remember right, and she's still famous. People still remember her songs, her poetry, books for children, translations from Russian language.
If I can add one thing, Daniel, if I can add one thing, I know CSP is hoping to go to Israel in fall. When CSP has a chance to go to Israel in the fall, Israel just came out with a new shekel bill. The 100 shekel bill, the new bill features the poetess.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So there's a connection between her upbringing and then her, we might say, the blossoming when she got to Israel.
Yes, thanks a lot. So one of the churches of Kaunas and the central street of Kaunas, which is called Freedom Boulevard, and in Lithuanian language it sounds, it's pronounced Laisvės alėja, and it's one of the symbols of Kaunas. It's a commercial street with 2 rows of buildings built like 150 years ago. They all are the same height, 3-floor buildings. Some of them are higher, but mostly 3-floor buildings. And here is a lot of history of Jewish businesses. A lot of my clients brought pictures of the shops of their ancestors living here in Kaunas, and so on. A lot of cultural institutions as well. Now, one of the highlights of this street is a modern memorial in honor of 2 diplomats, 2 ambassadors, the Dutch ambassador and Japanese ambassador, Chuina Sugihara and Jan Zwartendijk, who this is the memorial. It's like among the trees, and now this memorial symbolizes visas which were granted to Jews who could leave Lithuania before the Holocaust in 1940 and early 1941. So 6,000 people succeeded, 6,000 Jews made their way to Japan, and from Japan to other countries. Here is my colleague William, also a guide specializing on Jewish tours. He gave a hug to Daniel Dolsky, a Jewish singer who was very famous in Lithuania between two world wars in 1920s, 1930s. So, by the way, Lithuanians remember him, and even today you can buy records with his songs. This Eternal Flame is in honor of Lithuanians and others, also Jews, who were killed during the battles of independence, during the War of Independence, which started in 1918 and lasted for about 2 years. And here are a lot of statues of military men and some culture people and writers and poets and so on. And here I walk on a narrow street which is called Jerusalem pathway or Jerusalem Street, and here is a synagogue, one of the synagogues of Kaunas. There were 30 synagogues in Kaunas before the Second World War. This synagogue is called Ohel Yaakov, and it was built in 1870, so they celebrated 150 years recently. It's an active synagogue. There is a small Jewish community in Kaunas today. There are 4,000 Jews in Lithuania today. Most of them live in Vilnius, like 3,500 live in Vilnius. In Kaunas, like 300 people, maybe 350 people, and the rest of the Jews are in different other places of Lithuania. This is my father, the founder of our travel company, and he tells about the story of the Jews in Slobodka neighborhood. Slobodka means suburb in Russian language, and it's a former Jewish suburb. And here you can see a house which is it's a dwelling house. People live there, and it is decorated with pieces of mirror, cut mirrors, like broken mirrors, and these broken mirrors, they symbolize the broken Jewish lives and the Holocaust, because here was entrance to Kaunas ghetto, and there is a small memorial, actually not so small, and it has a map of the ghetto with some explanations, where was the Judenrat and where was the Arbeitsamt, the workers' headquarters. And it says in few languages that 2 years the ghetto existed here. Now, this neighborhood has a lot of old wooden houses in here, and all these wooden houses, they are old and they are authentic, built by the Jews, as this neighborhood was 100% Jewish neighborhood. Now, from Slobodka neighborhood, we move to the 9th Fort. 9th Fort is one of the defensive fortifications which were built around Kaunas 150 years ago, and it was turned into a prison later on, and the Nazis used this place for the extermination of Jews and other Untermenschen, subhumans, who were supposed to be killed according to Nazi pseudo racist theory. So actually Nazis didn't use the fortification itself. They used the field just next to the fort, where you can see now this huge concrete memorial. It's like 90 feet tall, and here I show it from drone from the other side. So here 30,000 Jews and 20,000 non-Jews, mostly Russian prisoners of war, were killed. And by that, actually, we end our brief virtual tour of Kaunas, and we drive 50 kilometers, 30 miles north, and we find ourselves at the entrance to the town of Kedaini. Kedaini is much smaller than now.
if I can, Daniel, just just in terms of the ninth fort, the ghetto there, just I wanted to point out for one thing there, that one of the leaders in the ghetto was a young rabbi, Rabbi Ephraim Oshri, and he wrote a book that is called Responsa from the Holocaust. He didn't intend to write this book. It's not the mission that he set out for in his life. But he was a young rabbi, and when the senior leaders of the community were all murdered, he began to receive questions from the yeshiva students and people who live a traditional Jewish life about some of the nuances of the life that they found themselves in. One of the most famous questions is every morning we thank the Almighty for not creating us a slave. And one question that came up is, can we still recite that blessing if we're forced to do slave labor every day? So that's a very simple question. There are real life and death questions that come up. But it's a book that I'll add into the chat. But Kovno was a very big ghetto and became a center where many Jews had a better chance of surviving in the ghetto there than in smaller communities where they were murdered by bullets. I just wanted to, before we went into this other place, I just wanted to make sure that we heard about this hero, almost an accidental hero, not just because of the leadership that he gave, but afterwards, the memory that he preserved.
Another question was, he was asked if they can eat horse meat or any other non-kosher meat, and the answer was yes, you can eat, but you shouldn't enjoy it. In translation, in direct translation, it was don't lick your fingers.
Yeah, I think the saddest question that he faced over and over again was, if you have the opportunity to, get your name or name of a family member off of the list, one of these Nazi lists, are you allowed to do so? Can you trade a life for a life? These are questions for another time, but I just, in terms of what we have just seen before, is the context where these questions took place. I would also be remiss if I didn't welcome Suli Chenkin, who is from Kovno and is a child survivor of the ghetto. So we hope that we'll be able to hear from you another time, and we're so grateful that you're able to be here today.
Yeah, this is one of the churches of Kedaini. It belonged to Radziwill noble family, who actually owned the whole town of Kedaini in the medieval period. These stones, they cross the road. Here was the defensive wall, and you can see also the river Navyaza, which crosses the town. So I started to say that Kedaini is much smaller than Kaunas. Kaunas, as a second large city, has about 350,000 people in it, and Kedaini is only 35,000. Now here in Kedaini, or Keidan in Yiddish, you can see two synagogues, which look nice, and they stand exactly next to each other. And here was a mikveh on this spot, and there was a little fence around this courtyard. And so these two synagogues, one synagogue, the left one, is newer, and the right one is older. The left one has bigger windows, and the right one has smaller windows. So the old synagogue was built as a fortress. There was a Holocaust in 17th century, Khmelnytsky riots, when thousands of Jews were slaughtered and killed. And after that, Jews started building synagogues as fortresses. And this Yellowish synagogue is an example of synagogue fortress. And the white synagogue was built in the 19th century. And it has a structure which is very typical to Lithuania. The building is divided into 2/3 and 1/3. The 1/3 is the entrance third. Has two floors of windows. The second floor is the place for women's section, which was planned in the synagogue from its construction, from the very beginning. So unlike all the synagogues which were not planned to have women section as integral part of the synagogue. We can find such synagogues in Poland, in Lithuania, in Ukraine. They all square buildings with only one space inside, not taken into consideration women's section. So 19th century, again, Enlightenment movement, changes in the Jewish community, and consideration and reconstruction of a lot of synagogues in many places. Now, in these two buildings, there is a cultural center. One building is a art school, and another building is a synagogue. Is a museum. Now we'll meet the director of the museum, very friendly, good lady who always welcomes us and our clients, our groups from all over the world. Her name is Audronė, and she agreed to participate in our short documentary videos about Kedainiai, and she speaks about the activities of the multicultural center and shows the exhibition of local artists. Now there is a permanent exhibition on the second floor. We'll see it shortly. Now Arona Kodesh, the Ark, was destroyed during the war, and after the war this building was used as a concert hall. So here was a stage for performances, and so no interior decorations, or almost no interior decorations survive, but they took a picture from another synagogue. Now on the second floor there is a women's section, which I already mentioned, and this is, by the way, the drone footage, and you can see the market square. So here in the very center is a market square and two synagogues. So and this proves us that really Jews were a very important part of this town, lived in the very center. They ran most of the shops of the town. And again, when we read history books, so there is usually political history or history of economics. But if we think for a second, or for a minute, about the life of simple people, how they lived, how they communicated, how Jews didn't know Lithuanian language and Lithuanians didn't know Yiddish, and so on and so forth. So here is a small permanent exhibition on the second floor in the women's section with a lot of pictures, a lot of sad part of Jewish history, Holocaust, and so on. I will scroll a little bit. Now, this is a Jewish street of Kedaini. It's still called Žydų gatvė, or Jewish street, and there are a lot of old houses which once upon a time belonged to the Jews of Kedaini. And so once this Jewish street was much longer than it is today. Today it's only short, small part of the old Jewish street. And here is an old log house. So that's how really old houses looked like in these places. So here you can see a little annex to the old Jewish house. And by the way, you can see the sign which says Žydų. G is for Gatvė, street, and Žydų it sounds like Žyd in Russian, which is a curse, but in Lithuanian language is a normative word. Now here you can see a little annex, and you can see that part of the roof is like a window. Yeah, it can be opened, so it's a permanent sukkah, which was an annex to this Jewish estate. Now from here, by the way, it's for sale, and there is a number. If you want to inquire, I can help you.
Just want to ask you one thing, Daniel. We got a question in the chat.
Sure.
We got a question in the chat about wooden synagogues, which are very popular in Poland. Was that architectural motif, was that also popular in Lithuania?
Yes, a lot of synagogues were wooden. In this video, we have only stone synagogues. There are 11 wooden synagogues in Lithuania today, and two of them were recently renovated. So this is a third synagogue of Kedaini, which is not renovated yet. They do some works here, and when we were filming last year in Kedaini, so we didn't have permission to enter, but there were workers and they were not against it, so we entered and we made some footages. So the third synagogue is considered the synagogue of the Vilna Gaon. This is the building. So Vilna Gaon, when he was a child, when he was 6 years old, he studied in Kedaini for about 3 or 4 years, as Kedaini was a place of famous yeshivot at that period, 1726. He was born in 1720. And there was a plaque on the wall of this synagogue that here once Vilna Gaon used to study. So this small town and its small old city, this place has 3 standing evidences of Jewish presence. Of course, a lot of houses which were once owned by the Jews, but on the house you can't say today, but the synagogues are very vivid examples. Now here I walk on the main street and I hold a phone book which was published in 1939. And this book has a lot of Jewish names in Kedaini and other parts of Lithuania, and they read the names of people, of Jewish people who lived on that main street, and also I could give you some of their phone numbers. So from the central street, we'll jump to a new market square in a second. So Kedaini was very central and commercial town in Lithuania, and it had 2 market squares. This is a statue of famous Duke Radziwill. By the way, the descendants of Radziwill family still live today in the United States, and they even married with Kennedy family. Yeah? Sister of Jackie Kennedy, Lee. Yeah? Her husband was Duke Radziwill, Lee Radziwill. So the central market square, the new market square, has much less of a Jewish history as Jews occupied the old market square, but still is a central part of Kedaini, recently nicely renovated. Now, I didn't show you this monument in the first part of the episode about Kedaini. It's just next to the 2 synagogues. We came back later and had some more shots here. This is a Holocaust Memorial just in the center of town. And this is local initiative to commemorate the victims of the Holocaust. And from here, we'll jump to the cemetery. So here we discuss with my dad that it's time to go back to Vilnius, most probably. And our colleague makes some shots with the camera. Now, this is one of the best preserved Jewish cemeteries in Lithuania, and it's hard to explain how it happened and why it happened, but local people didn't steal this from this cemetery, or didn't steal a lot of the stones, and really we have what to show to people who are interested. And the last location in Kedaini episode is the Holocaust site. This is the hard part of our work, being Jewish guides in Lithuania. Every story you have the Holocaust episode. This is a mass grave. This trench, which is like behind us, is a mass grave of over 2,000 Jews who were murdered here in August 1941, late August 1941. Most of the killings in Lithuania took place in the first stage of the Holocaust, so-called the bullied Holocaust, and it was before the using gas chambers in Auschwitz. So this is a newer memorial which was erected not so long ago, and it has names of people on it. There are only few such places in Lithuania, because in most places there were no lists discovered. Once I used to say that lists were destroyed, but today, when we did find some lists of victims, we say that we believe that one day we'll find other lists as well. And here we move to Kalvarija. Kalvarija is a small town on the border with Poland, and it was a typical Jewish shtetl. What's a shtetl is? Shtetl is a small town where you could find a high percentage of Jews, or out of the total population, and there were a lot of shtetls in Lithuania. By the way, the reason for numerous shtetls is it's a double video, is the cultural autonomy, or the golden age of Lithuanian Polish Jewry, when Jews were allowed to settle in many places in Lithuania, and step by step they did find their places to settle, to become a first shoemaker, a first tailor, and a doctor, and a lawyer, and whatever professions they had. So this is a church in the center of the town. So the same was in Kalvarija. There was a big, relatively big Jewish community. I don't remember the actual numbers, but what I do remember, and I tell here on this exact location, walking among nowadays shops of Kalvarija, is that there were 82 shops on this square 100 years ago, 120 years ago, and 72 out of these 80 shops belong to the Jews. These numbers I do remember. So, no wonder why local people, I'll put it in a mild way, didn't like the Jews. So this is again the drone of the place. It's much smaller than Kaunas, and from the church, it's a minute walk, and you'll see me walking in the courtyard of two synagogues. So you saw two synagogues in Kedaini, and you will see two synagogues in Kalvarija as well. So the tradition of this is a memorial in honor of Lithuanian independence of 1918. I forgot that this episode is between the church and the synagogue. So the tradition of building synagogues in one location also brings us back to the golden age of Lithuanian Jewry, when the community was growing rapidly and they needed more and more space for praying, and they built synagogues next to each other for various reasons, because they didn't have space, or they just wanted to have one more synagogue. All the Jews were Ashkenazi. There were no Ashkenazi or Sephardi synagogues, so they just had the same synagogues. I mean, the same structure of synagogues, and with different rabbis. So this synagogue is in a poor condition. That's how Kedaini synagogues looked 25 years ago. Yes, they were abandoned for some period of time. They were renovated 20 years ago. And by the way, here I show you, if you can see, it's a second layer of the frame. This picture I took in this building in 2006, when there was no roof put on it, and there were trees growing inside the building. So this is the bima of the synagogue. So you can see the courtyard of two synagogues and the rabbi's house as well. So this is the second synagogue, the newer one, and the rabbi's house with the Star of David above the entrance. So there is a small cemetery in Kedaini, in Kalvarija as well, and there is a fair number of Jewish houses. We could enter the synagogue. You can see that somebody started the renovation and ran out of funds. So the city makes some art exhibitions, local art exhibitions in here. You can see the place of the Arona Kodesh, the arch here with the Star of David. These are the cultural, religious heritage, Jewish heritage locations in Lithuania. They are in a different condition. They run by different people. But what is very positive and pleasant for me is the change. 20 years ago, when I started to be a guide, we were like unicorns. Oh, you speak about the Jewish history? Oh, really? You know the Jewish history? Are you allowed to speak about the Jewish history? So, and today it's very popular. It's common. People want to include Jewish history as part of Lithuanian history. And there are books translated or books written. There are cultural events. And last year, 2020, which is not very successful for many businesses and not successful for travel business at all, was declared by the Lithuanian state, the state of Lithuania, as the year of the Vilna Gaon, which which had to bring, excuse me, a lot of cultural events, a lot of visitors, conferences, and so on and so forth, but it didn't happen.
Let me just ask one thing, Daniel.
Actually, this is about the video, and now we can have Q&A.
Oh, fantastic! So, do we have some questions that came in? One of which is about who's paying for the renovation. This question was from Sharon Loftspring. Yeah.
Renovation usually is funded by the state and by the Jewish community. Jewish community got funds from the state of Lithuania, got reparations for the property, which was for the community property, not private property, community property, which was nationalized in 1940. Which means synagogues, libraries, schools, whatever public buildings Jews had. So from this money, we did, I mean Jewish community of Lithuania, did a lot of projects. and in almost each of the projects, we had additional support from the state of Lithuania or from some European support funds.
Right. So you had mentioned that there's 4,000 Jews in Lithuania today, 3,500 of them, or the majority in Vilnius, 500 in Kovno, Kaunas, and in the small towns. Is there any community or not really?
There are regional communities in Klaipėda, which is known as Memel in our in Yiddish language. There are Jews in Šiauliai, in Panevėžys, in Vilkomir, in some smaller places, but really like 1 or 2 people. For example, my last visit to one small place not far from Vilnius, I had to meet somebody there, and he appeared to be the last Jew of this little shtetl, who came back. Not he, but his mother came back after the war, married a local man, a Lithuanian man, and he lives his life there. So it was really like amazing for me to to meet the last Jew of Vevis, if you want the name of the town.
We got a question about Jews owning land. I know in certain parts of Europe, Jews were not allowed to own land. Were they allowed to own land in Lithuania and throughout, I guess, the modern history?
Jews could own land from 1620s, and they did own land up until the Holocaust. Yeah.
We got a question. Let me begin with the easy one first, which is nothing would make us happier than for us to see you, Daniel, in a CSP hat. So I guess the question is, and by the way, I think you had the old hat. The new one is even better. But my question for you is, what's the status of Lithuania with the pandemic, and when do you think tourists will be? Are tourists coming now? And if not, when do you think they'll be allowed to come?
Well, first of all, the situation gets better, and we are getting ready to have first tourists very soon, like early June. And but speaking of tourism back to pre-pandemic level, I don't know, maybe another year at least. Mm-hmm. It's hard to imagine that people will actually, all of you have better answer than me. Are you going to travel this year?
Let me just see. Actually, by a show of hands, Dale, you're going to have to use the other hand. I see you leaning on one. So, what do you call it? If you think you're going to be traveling within the next 6 months, raise your hand or wave. So we got a couple hands. So within the next year, raise your hand or wave. Definitely. All right. So again, we see a couple more hands. Okay. So I think, Daniel, it really depends. I mean, one of the reasons that CSP is investing in these travel adventures is because there are places we want to go and be connected to that at the moment we're just not able to be there. So let me, if I can, let me just ask, let's conclude with one. Let me ask you one complicated question, and then we'll ask with one about you, which is, how is Lithuania, how isn't the right word? Lithuania's embrace of its responsibility in the atrocities of the Holocaust seems to be mixed. Can you give us an update? What's the latest? Are things getting better in that respect, or are they remaining the same? Or what should we know as American Jews or North American Jews, because CSP has really become an international organization, about the Lithuanian society and the Holocaust?
I like your questions.
I'm so glad. That's good. I mean, if you can tell
Yeah.
Ari, I'd appreciate it. This one's a hard one, but I think it's one that we would regret if we didn't.
So first of all, I remember that when you were here with the group, we liked to use the word "everything is very complicated."
That's true.
So indeed, it is complicated, and actually, I would put it this way. There is no Holocaust denial in Lithuania, and there is no denial of the fact that there were Lithuanians who killed the Jews. This is both on official level and both on level of relations or communications between local Jews and local non-Jews. Now, there are people who, this is if I may allow myself to be not very politically correct, but a higher society of Lithuania, who feel ashamed of that fact, and they understand that this is unwashable stain on the reputation of their country, even though they didn't do it, not this generation, and maybe their parents also didn't do it, and maybe they are children of righteous Gentile who risked their lives to save the Jews. So these people know the history and they accept the fact, and it's very hard for them. It's hard for them to talk about that. Now, and the unpleasant part of my answer, unpleasant for me as somebody who lives in this country, who was born in this country, is that there are people who, they don't deny that the Jews were killed, but they don't feel sorry for that. They say they are anti-Semites, and they think that it was the right thing to do. They are nationalists, and they say that Lithuania had to be Lithuanian and not Jewish. You see, the very fact that I can bring such a lecture to your program, showing Jewish Vilnius, showing Jewish Kaunas and Jewish Kedainiai and Jewish blah blah blah, with all that heritage, and what was possible to put into 45 minutes video episode, it's only one drop of the whole sea of the Jewish world which once was here. And there are people who do hate that. They don't want it to here. Now, you are Americans today. You know, when I traveled in the United States, I make it a little bit complicated. Charlie, you can stop me when it's too much. When I traveled in the United States, I felt that people, they understand that you are different, and they accept. This is my feeling. Yeah, they accepted me being different when I spoke to local people on different occasions. So you live in a huge country with enormous mix of population and different nationalities and different confessions and everything. Lithuanians, they live in a small country, extremely white country. You won't meet a single dark-skinned person in Lithuania, and a very homogenic society, and there are a lot of haters. At the same time, Lithuania votes for Israel. Lithuania supports Israel. When the last war started in Israel, there were a lot of pro-Israeli articles in the newspapers. And this change happened, I think, 7-8 years ago. So it's really complicated. Lithuania was one of the 3 countries which voted against the resolution of UNESCO that Jerusalem has no, the Jews have no historical rights for Jerusalem. There were only 3 countries in Europe which dared to express their opinion, the pro-Jewish opinion on that issue. And I can give you more examples on positive things. But unfortunately, there is a lot of bad information as well.
Yeah.
You have more complicated questions? I'm ready.
No. I think we've had a lot of complication, a lot to think about today. I put in the chat this book called The Nazi's Granddaughter. And I know some of the participants today have heard Sylvia speak along with Grant Goshen, who's here. And it's a wonderful book. It's a wonderfully painful book. And Sylvia is paying a personal price in terms of writing this book and in terms of trying to expose the truth about what happened. But it is complicated. And nation building is complicated. And, you know, if we say that the modern state of Lithuania is, 25, 30 years into this, the United States is nearly 250 years into our own Republican, Democratic Republic experiment. And it's complicated here too. So we hear you. And I think the truth will always set us free and point us in the right path. I want to do 2 things. Number one is I put into the chat, everybody, the way you say thank you in Lithuanian is ačiū. It's one of my favorite words to say, right? And Jackie, who laughed, thank you. You're the only one who laughed. I appreciate it. You don't even need a tissue when you say it. It's really fantastic. So we want to say to you, Daniel, ačiū. And anybody who wants to stay along, the one question people have is, who are you and what's your Jewish background and what's a nice Jewish boy like you doing in Lithuania right now? So if anyone would like to leave, please feel free. But let's spend the last 5 minutes hearing a little bit about Daniel. And then if we create the right mood, I think Dale Schatz might even sing us a goodbye song, which would be very, very special. So Daniel, tell us, who is the real Daniel?
Oh, this happened to be a more complicated question than the previous one.
Oh, should we go back?
So actually, you know, as I know all of it, it's not very interesting to me. So yeah, my family survived, part of my family survived the Holocaust and settled back in Lithuania. And when I asked my grandfather why they didn't go to the United States, this was a question of 10 years old boy. When I was 10 years old, it was still Soviet Union, was not very colorful for me. And when I was 11, Soviet Union, Lithuania separated from Soviet Union. So my grandfather couldn't answer me why they didn't go to the United States. And from that point, my life changed. When Soviet Union collapsed, our lives changed. We were allowed to speak out that we are Jews and that we want Rosh Hashanah not as just a supper, but as a holiday, and so on. We rebuilt our Jewish community, and I was very involved as a consul in a Jewish summer camps. And later on, I made the Aliyah to Israel, and then I made the Yerida coming back to Lithuania. And my father started a travel company. I wasn't about, I didn't think that I will be in travel business. I didn't study travel management. I studied, my education is in finance field. But when I was a student, I became deeply involved in the company, and I realized that it's more, it's much more about a mission, and of course there is a portion of earning for living, but I felt a very strong connection to the heritage thing. And that's how I live my life, being almost 20 years in travel business. But you know, when I say in travel business, it's one of two of my business cards. One says general manager of a company, and another one says a guide. So I think I'm more a guide than the general manager of a company.
Daniel, I think you know, as we wrap up, I want to thank you, and I think you're doing more than just guiding. I mean, in terms of what you and your father have created, you know, for many of us, you are, you know, the holders of memory, and you communicate that to so many people. And you know, the irony of the situation is that we can't be with you, but in some ways, Zoom has enabled more people to be with you than could before. So I hope this is just, I know we're going to continue. I know we have an upcoming trip to go to Riga, which is also part, sort of like of the Litvak world a little bit. You'll explain how it is, yes, and you'll explain how it isn't. But I just wanted to say, Achu on behalf of all of us, and I don't have to clean my screen when I say that. And I just again, I hope everybody has a wonderful day, but most important, I hope everybody stays safe. And we visited history, but some of the things that we learned today in history are happening in our world today, and I hope that they'll inform where we go next. I wasn't joking about Dale Schatz. Dale, do you have like a nigun for us to conclude? One, to give us a little bit of peace and a little bit of inspiration when I think we all need it most. So before we go to Dale, any last words from you, Daniel?
No last words. Actually, I wish all of you keep safe. This is the most important thing now. And keep safe and learn as much as you can.
All right, thank you.
This is our Jewish wisdom, I guess.
I love it. All right, Dale, bring it on. If you want to sing us a nigun, we got a minute. Oh, let me unmute you. Sorry. Yeah, there you go. It was like, why is that the guy not unmuted? Is it working?
Yep, here we go. 2 quick things in 60 seconds. Oh, Daniel, my brother, you are older than me. Do you still feel the pain of the scars that won't heal? Your eyes have light. You see more than I. Daniel, you're a star in the face of the sky. Hametzakaratia Anani Bamechabiani Hametzakaratia Anani Bamechabia Maury, Daniel, you made a place that was narrower in my mind seem less narrow, and give me hope for all of old Europe that it will open and stay open for Jews.
Amen. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you this week, and we'll see you beyond. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you very much. If you have more questions, you can find my email. Charlie can give you area. You can find my details.
Achu, everybody.